you have 10 minutes. There'll be a bell at 8, and it's probably a good idea to leave time for a couple of questions at the end, because people often do. Ruth's submission is on our agenda, page 96, and the floor is yours, Ruth.
Firstly, I apologise for my confusion with times. I'm just in the middle of tenders with my work and got very engrossed in that, and my kids turned the alarm off on my phone. Yeah, so we feel, I'm the chairperson for the community association in Pirongia, and we just feel that the representation, Pirongia is quite unique in its setting, and just it's quite different from the other, like Te Amuru or Cambridge. And we just feel quite strongly that we do need to be represented in a different way from Te Amuru and Cambridge. We're not really sure what format that would take, whether that would be a board or the association, or but we feel with having a local councillor in the form of Claire currently, that does represent our needs, that we can go to her with that. So yeah, that was really just all I had, was just I feel that we definitely do need a representation for our area, because we are quite different, and we do take in a lot of rural regions as well under that. Because one of the things that we just weren't too clear on would be where the Pirongia ward would sit in the new model. I don't know if anybody can actually clarify that for me or not. Anybody? Yeah. So that was the only question I had, and just yeah. Sorry, it's been a bit vague. I'm just trying to.
No, that's all good.
Juggle look, quite a few balls at one time.
I'm happy to have a go and stand to be corrected. I think Graham Graham Pollard is here, I see. So, but the proposal is that Pirongia and Kakapuku would be joined, and the boundaries shifted a little bit for Kaipeki, which currently sits in Pirongia, to move largely to Cambridge. So that area would still have 2 councillors, but previously, of course, it had 3. Te Awamutu would move from 4 to 3, Cambridge from 5 to 4, and we have 1 extra councillor being the Maori ward. So yes, there's. I think everyone would accept that Cambridge is unique, as of course are all our communities, I guess. Yeah. So does anyone have any questions for Ruth?
Andrew, I think you meant Pirongia is unique, not Cambridge, in that.
I did mean Pirongia is unique, although Cambridge is too. So I'm not exactly wrong, but yeah.
We're all unique.
Right. Cannot be more unique.
Andrew,
Claire.
Yeah, thanks. And hi, Ruth, good to see you here. And also Susan as well, both from the Pirongia Community Association. And thanks for making the submission and making the point that, yeah, Pirongia has a special, I suppose, yeah, uniqueness about it. That means that just relying on like the Te Amuru Community Board to represent it probably wouldn't sort of be the right sort of way of doing it. Like, I don't know if you could elaborate a bit more on that, Ruth, but I think, I mean, that's something we're going to deliberate on anyway, but yeah, it'd be good to just have a bit more detail on that point.
Well, we feel that, yeah, I'm not really very clear on how the TA board runs, but currently the Community Association are meeting monthly. And though we are a small committee, we've got quite a few, well, we've got a couple of new people coming on board for this year. So we feel that if we've got the right people in those positions and a good team of people that we're actually being a means of communicating issues from the community through to council, and there's quite a few people on that committee that are doers. So we do like to see progress and actually, you know, get stuff done. And we're focusing on our area rather than sort of the wider community, like the Te Amuru or Waipa. So it is a volunteer group. So obviously, yeah, I don't know what that would take if we would look at becoming financially assisted in that to keep more progress or to have a higher representation. But it's definitely a huge potential in that small group on what we can do.
And I'd just like to say too that I go to those meetings, and they're full agendas. You've got quite a bit happening, and very specific to Pirongia itself. But there's a lot of things going on, and I really appreciate all the work that you and Susan and the rest of the committee put in. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Ruth. And we have been well submitted to on Pirongia and the committee there. So
Commission,
they haven't been covered.
Question, please, Andrew.
Yeah, Graham, absolutely.
Yeah, just for clarification, are we dealing with two committees? Ruth has come in as the chair of the Community Association in Pirongia. How does that go on when we have the Pirongia Ward Committee? Are they two separate organisations? Are they the same? Does someone?
Sorry. Sorry, Claire. Go ahead.
Oh no, you sat, Ruth. Yeah.
I was just going to say, as the community association, as the chair, I sit on that board for the ward. So we feed in as one of the connectors to the other areas, so Kaipaki and Ohaipo currently. Yeah. So they are two separate entities.
My question is, do you need to have two committees? If there's going to be some changes,
That's always the question. Sorry. Though in our mind, we do meet monthly, and we're actually seeing progress with the ward. I've recently just come on that, so it's meeting quarterly. I'm not too sure yet how the progress or how that whole process works, but we're definitely seeing progress by having monthly meetings with our own association.
Yep, thanks for that. Look, I see, Susan, that you want to have a word. You can quickly. I will allow that. So yeah.
So I will be fast. So just really here to support Ruth and obviously echo what we're saying. And I think, the summary is that we want to ensure that there's representation, whether that's councillor, ward or community association is kind of the second part of this. But I think the most important thing from our point of view is that the right people are doing the leadership of whatever that looks like, and that it's properly, funded really at the end of the day. So, 2 councillors or 3 is almost secondary to whether we've got that representation that allows us to feed into council and bring information back. The construct of that is secondary, really. What we have to make sure, though, is that whatever it is, there's a mandate from the community, whether that is a ward committee or a association or a board or a councillor. That for us is kind of the bottom line, is that there's recognition of that representation at council level, whatever that looks like. Yeah.
No, that's great. I think we've got that. Thank you very much.
That's all I want to say.
Thanks for your submissions and submission, and we'll now move on. So next all good. Next we have Glenn Morgan. Glenn's submission was on page 184 of our agenda. I should say several pages of our agenda, because it's a substantial submission, and obviously a lot of thought's gone into it. So Glenn, same deal, there will be a bell at 8 minutes. You have 10 in total, and the floor is yours.
Right, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Look, good morning, everybody. I just wanted to speak to just the community board subject, obviously exclusively today. And I want to do that because I provided, as you mentioned, quite a bit of supporting material. And I wanted to ensure participants had an opportunity to discuss the aspects with me in this sort of forum. And so for the record, I just provided details around some of the representation process and some of the media and correspondence I've received, and also my experience of attending community board meetings and also presenting to them. I've also included the original circulated option 2 document, which was out in the community for a while before this review, and also extracts from the 2021 resident survey, which is quite supportive of my position. And I'd like to also confirm that I've consulted widely with the community before drafting my proposal option 2, and also this submission. So there's a document there amongst it called summation. And so I just really like to talk to the key community components that have come out of my consultation. And there are points numbers 1 to 6. And then I'd be keen to hear some feedback. And I guess I'm a little bit unique in I've presented probably a roadmap or a template for what I believe a community engagement sort of entity or entities could look like, and where I think this should or could go. So basically, these are the key points in and around why community boards currently aren't effective. So really, they don't reflect or represent the community currently. So I believe that a structure that involves 8 members, some elected, some selected, will represent a better balance. And I've included, as an example of selected grey power, council, I think, social providers, iwi, to give the representation the balance that it needs and the reach that it needs. It's not conclusive, but it's the direction I think that the council need to go in for engagement. The second point, community members, community board members are sometimes time, knowledge and governance poor, and that's really the case. And so effective engagement is very difficult to do when you've got other things to do, you've got limited time and distractions and different skill sets. So what I've proposed, and I guess it mirrors very much in a minor way, or that's maybe minor is not quite the right word, what the council currently does itself. So you have an elected governance group of people, and you have council to enact policy and process for the community. So what I'm saying is you need to mirror that really with the community board structure, and you need to have dedicated managers, and these dedicated managers who can do the work, the liaison work and the community work on behalf of a governance group so that the skills are better represented, and time is better used, and there's better liaison with the council, and basically better outcomes achieved for all the groups that are involved. That's a critical area. I think it's very difficult to ask effectively volunteer people or elected volunteer people to come to the party and achieve the outcomes that I think the community are wanting now, and are certainly demonstrating they're wanting. The third point, council doesn't really acknowledge or adequately acknowledge or represent the community boards and therefore the community. And I think that's more the case now as other forms are reporting on. So I've put in here that really come to the table is sort of the exercise, and there's been a tone that's sort of started to come through these presentations. I think the managers, not any representatives of the actual community board, the managers need to be sitting on the representative subcommittees and have a voting right in that particular situation, just like iwi. I think the community is pretty important. They need to be heard, and sure, they can go through a better channel of community engagement, but they also need to sit at the council table, and they need to make sure that their decisions or what they believe is actually taken seriously and ratified in a voting process. Point 4, community boards cost too much or are a waste of time. Well, they clearly cost too much. I've included the figures in there. If you continue with the current structure, it's going to cost over $1.2 million. And really, in the fiscal environment we're in, for the outcomes that are being achieved, that's really just not acceptable. There are ways around that, and the charitable entity status is one that I've indicated. I certainly believe that obviously targeting the way that council spends its money in the community area is important, but by changing the status and allowing for the boards themselves to be independent and going and seeking independent funds, you'll take a burden off ratepayers and the community, and you'll also expose those entities to a better access to funds. And believe me, the funds are out there if they're professionally gathered. So there's a combination of factors. Certainly the council still need to pay for the entities, but not to the level they currently are, and it must be better targeted. Bulk funding, yes, there is funding that goes through the community boards, but it's not enough, and it's not particularly well targeted. And the outcomes, I believe, for the majority of the grants would possibly be doubtful if you look at what they achieve. So what I'm saying is you need to significantly fund more into that area with the right entity, and you need to do that on the basis that there is more control over some of those funds. But those funds must also be much more targeted, and they must be much more discretionary and managed better, so that the money that goes into this area is applied to the community, so there actually are outcomes that come back. There are many providers out there, but not all of them provide actually any real returns to the community. Final point of those points, community boards won't last and can be removed by the mayor and councillors anyway. And what about amalgamation? So that's the risk that's faced here, is effectively anything that exists now or may exist is going to be subject to not the whims, but the decision-making of other people, and also amalgamation, which is clearly on the horizon. What you need to do is put, I guess, a parochial view aside and ask yourself, what would I want to be in place if I wasn't here? And so the structure that I've proposed as a draft structure allows for that, because it'll have a slightly different status. It won't be able to be changed, and it might survive anything that happens. And I think if you want proper community engagement and you want it ongoing, that's the sort of residents and the community in general, in that order, feel they've got a long-term relationship with whatever happens in the council space. So broadly, that's what I wanted to sort of just speak to, but I'm more than happy to hear back, because there is a lot in there. And as I said, it really is sort of like a future document as to what you could do. But quite clearly, my position, which may not be clear, but quite clearly my position is no community boards, which I believe should have been the decision that's made or be made previous to this representation. And that'll give you the opportunity to actually find something that's fit for purpose, that works in here, represents the community, and is a fiscally responsible group or groups. Tell me what you think.
Can't hear you, Andrew.
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, so Glenn, you've obviously put a lot of time and effort and thought into this. So and there's a lot of things in there for us to consider for sure. Does anyone have a question for Glenn? Marcus.
Yep. Thanks for your submission, Glenn. It is really well thought out, and there's a lot of things there that I agree with, especially the funding and where we can use those funds to better use. And I think it's something that we need to, take into strong consideration. Thanks for your work on that.
Hazel.
I'd just like to ask Glenn how many community board meetings have you attended, Glenn?
I've attended two actual community board meetings, and I've met independently with community board members. And I presented to a community board meeting as well.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Claire.
Yeah, thanks, Glenn. Really great that you've put a lot of thought into this submission. I was going to ask about your innovative alternative. Are you basing that on a real life example, that other councils may have implemented this elsewhere in New Zealand?
Well, I guess, so the short answer is no. I haven't really looked internally, because if you look at internal governance in New Zealand, you either have them or you don't have them, if you're looking at community boards. So for instance, Hamilton don't have them and they don't want them. So in my discussions with other councils, and I've discussed things with about 6 councils, Hamilton don't need them, don't want them, they engage with the community adequately. So that's an option, obviously, for you to consider, because there are councils out there with them, and there are councils out there without them. But so I haven't, this format doesn't really exist per se, but the components of it really do, because I guess you've got to ask yourself, if you're a community member, what would you want? How would you want to engage, and how do you reach in? And the resident survey is probably telling you quite a few things about what people think about engaging, firstly, and about what they think about what can be achieved. So this, to me, the reason I spent time and effort onto it, and I don't normally spend time and effort on some things, only things that I think matter. I think this matters because you're not reaching the community adequately now, and you need to. And the components that I've taken out, that I've gone through here, are really what people have told me about what they think matters to them. And those are some of the solutions that I believe you wrap around it. But I think you also have to have an independent group, 2 independent groups, but you need to protect them, obviously, for the things that may change, but you need to be able to make them even more independent because of I guess, things that could affect them in the future. You want community to have some continuity, and that's where I think I've tried to go here. But Claire, it's a draft. Believe me, it's not a perfect document in any shape or form, but for once in my life, I've probably listened to more people than I normally would. And so in listening to those people, they've really brought those aspects to the table here for what I've presented. I just finished by answering your question. Sorry, it's a bit of a roundabout the way. I did speak to someone who was on the board of Porsche AG in Germany, just for argument's sake, because I look to the Northern Europe when I look to anything that's done well for anything really. And I do happen to know someone who knew someone. So I talked to that particular person, and that board sits under Volkswagen, a bigger group. And on that board, on that group, they don't call it a board, by the way. They don't like the sound of the word board. They think that detracts from what they do. They have representatives of the suppliers, the shop floor workers, the managers, the sales staff, the general public. So they have a community group that runs that company made up of all representative parties, and they all have an equal say.
Thanks.
Now, I'm trying to achieve that in this.
Thanks, Glenn. That's certainly, as Marcus said, food for thought. We are up for time, but Graham, a quick question.
Yeah, Glenn, thanks. Nice to catch up again. You just wondered in
Hello.
a time when the current government is centralising a lot back towards Wellington, whether it's an absolutely crucial time to retain the community board and the work they do in the district. Yeah,
okay, so that's for our deliberations later, really. So thanks very much, Glenn. A lot of time and effort and work's gone into that, and we will consider it.
Hey, thanks very much for the opportunity. Be brave and be bold, because there's probably a good time to do it, I'd say. Cheers. Thanks. Thanks very much.
Okay, so is Charlotte with us?
Yes, I am.
Oh, excellent. Welcome, Charlotte. And I'll just go through the same. You have 10 minutes, but there'll be a bell at 8. And Charlotte's submission is on page 201, comprehensive submission on 201. So, yeah, Charlotte, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you. Morena tātou. Thank you for the opportunity to present my submission today on Waipa District Council's representation review. Today, my submission focuses on community boards, of which I do not support to be reinstated as part of this representation review. My submission is not based on personal opinions, interests, or spin. It is based on professional experience and the facts available. So I believe you'll be presented with a well-balanced and fair perspective of why I believe Waipa is long overdue for a different representation model. So there are a few points I want to cover off. 1, relevance. 2, purpose and linkages to outcomes. 3, layers of representation. 4, significance and engagement. And then I'll go into future options. So let's start with some context and link that to relevance today. Community boards were created by LGNZ during the reform in 1989 out of concern that some of the amalgamated councils would be so large that former communities of interest might lose representation. Community boards were used to enable democratic local decision-making on behalf of communities. More than 30 years later, we're still using the same model. Waipa is still relatively small in size and population compared to other districts and cities, yet everyone has equal opportunity to take part in local government decision-making in a way that best suits them. In 2021, to successfully engage with communities today, you must take a multi-channel approach to get cut through an increasingly more complex communication environment. This usually includes a mixture of things like media, owned channels, so that examples are your website, social media networks, newsletters, meetings, presentations, and that sort of thing. And then paid media like digital and print advertising and campaigns. These are just a few examples. And in council's case, a community board is one piece of your complex engagement puzzle. However, when you weigh up community boards as a community engagement tool alongside other ways to engage, the people cost is high and they require significant supplementary resource to facilitate each meeting. For example, staff time, advertising, and so on. From my professional experience, community boards lack the level of influence today that they potentially had 10 years ago, let alone 30 years ago. And there is plenty of evidence available to show you that Waipa residents and ratepayers engage in local government decision-making using other techniques and approaches that are far less resource intensive. So now I'd like to touch on the purpose of community boards. One of the key questions I wanted you to answer was, what do community boards do? You answered this on your website. Of 12 questions list, it was number 10 on the list. Purpose was vaguely described and failed to connect to any robust way to performance measures or outcomes. Looking through the consultation information, you focused on numbers, boundaries, and names, but did not provide anything substantial on whether community boards are still relevant today. Do they empower community engagement? Are they making a difference in Waipa? Are they achieving what council set out for them to achieve? Are community boards meeting the ever more complex two-way communication needs of communities? And are community boards meeting residents and ratepayers' expectations? Are they providing value for money? What's concerning here is that in your latest resident survey, almost half of residents surveyed said they didn't know what community boards do. Timing-wise, you probably had these results and there was an opportunity to address this when asking the community to have their say. Yet you skipped over this in your consultation with ads and social media posts prompting people to provide feedback on numbers and boundaries with no context or mention of what community boards do and why and what they achieve. Essentially, I would actually argue that this makes the quantitative data presented in the report in relation to the 49 submitters unusable because you haven't provided enough information to the public to give their feedback. I said in my written submission that because people don't know what community boards do, that I expected your response to this consultation process would be quite low, and I was correct. The numbers actually do fail to provide a true reflection of what the community knows about community boards or thinks about community boards. And without tangible, substantial answers to the questions I've raised in my submission, I can't see how you could hand on heart with confidence say that community boards were a valuable asset to the Waipa community and that they should be reinstated for the next year's election. My third point was around layers of representation. In the consultation material, it states, quote, community boards are an additional layer of representation that support directly to council. And the key word here is layer, which in local government can often imply unnecessary complexity, inefficiency, and sometimes a painful customer experience. If you did a stock take, you'd find that the responsibilities of community boards, as broadly set out in the legislation, are already carried out by the mayor, councillors, the council executive, and their staff. More specifically, you have made a significant investment into facilitating community engagement and consultation activities year on year that are carried out by permanent staff. You have to, because it is a legislative requirement. You have a comms team, you have newly appointed community advisors working at the front line, grassroots level, to improve the linkages between council and communities. You have iwi advisors, and there are other stakeholder managers. There are many layers. The community board layer, from my perspective, is unnecessary. It is adding complexity, it is inefficient, and as one submitter pointed out, the meetings are too formal and can be off-putting for members of the public anyway. Surely if a resident or ratepayer wants to discuss an idea, raise an issue or a concern, a direct line of communication to a councillor or a relevant council staff member would be their preferred option. It's certainly my preferred option, and that's why I'm talking to you today. So my fourth point was in relation to your significance and engagement policy, which I did notice was not addressed in the report to the committee, and this may have been an oversight. Council's significance and engagement policy was updated 4 months ago as part of the LTP following consultation with the community. This policy outlines how council will fulfil its legislative requirement to successfully engage and consult with the community under Section 5 of the Local Government Act 2002. It also outlines the framework for how council will inform, consult, involve, collaborate with, and empower communities to take part in local government decision-making. The policy makes absolutely no mention of using community boards as a mechanism to fulfil this legislative requirement. Even if this was an oversight, you have to ask yourself why no one thought about community boards being at least mentioned in this framework. What the policy does demonstrate, however, is that today the community has never been more empowered to engage with council, and there are many different ways to do this. So in my last point, in terms of future options and how you can attract and attract and retain elected members, perhaps the real opportunity here is to tighten up the total number of elected members, i.e. remove community boards, which could help to attract a wider pool of candidates to council. And as a Cambridge resident, I would like to see a strong calibre of candidates to vote for, and there are potentially elected community board members who could represent my views at the council table. I did notice that another submitter who's just spoken provided an alternative option. And it is clear that there are other ways of doing things that would achieve the right outcomes. Discretionary funding, for example, could be allocated by an existing council appointed funding committee to make this process a lot fairer and more transparent. I do have to note too that if your community board model was fit for purpose, you wouldn't be setting up a committee following the Streets for People trial to represent the community's views on cycling in Cambridge. Again, added layers. So I'll leave it there. I sincerely hope this feedback is considered and it encourages some more vigorous debate around if the community board model of 1989 still meets the needs of our communities in 2021 and beyond. Thanks.
Thanks, Charlotte. Yeah, a really comprehensive submission with a lot of points in it that I'm sure will create a lot of discussion in our deliberations. I think that's was time, but does anyone have a quick question? Susan.
Yeah, through the chair. Thank you, Charlotte. That was that was awesome. I have to say, I can't say I disagree with a single word you've said there, but what would your opinion be in terms of if we were to, in an ideal world, potentially do away with the community boards? Would you see there to be a need for a replacement by way of any form of structure? And if so, what do you think that structure would look like?
I think some of the other submitters have actually raised some pretty interesting feedback around committees. From experience, the District Promotion Fund Committee is actually a really good model of pulling in independent people to allocate those discretionary funds in a fair way. And they do bring a local focus to that committee. So I think that's one example of how it does work. And I do have to commend the submitters too who spoke from the Pirongia board side. Again, it's another model that seems to work really well, and perhaps that is one way that you could look at getting that local community voice. But again, I mean, I wasn't part of any decision making, of course, around the Streets for People committee and what you've set up there, but perhaps, yeah, maybe take a step back and have a look at what community boards weren't providing that sort of led you to make the decision to pursue that as an option.
Great, thanks, Charlotte.
Yep. Great.
Thanks for all your work too.
Yes, thanks very much indeed. Marcus.
Yeah, thanks, Charlotte. I quite agree with your comments. You've certainly made us aware of the Streets for People thing and the added layers. And being in front of the coalface as well, like you're an expert on what goes on. And so, yeah, I think we need to have a strong look at your ideas.
Thanks, Marcus. Okay, well, I guess that's the end of our submissions, verbal submissions, and it's time to move into the deliberation phase. Ken, did you want to make any comments about that? I'm thinking that we'd just go to the recommendation and look through item C1 and just carry on.
Yeah. So look, no specific comments from me, Andrew, and committee members. Although I do know that, I think what might be worthwhile is Jo just giving a really high level overview of the process. If she could just take maybe 2 or 3 minutes to do that, and then yes, I agree. It is a matter of stepping through all the key deliberation points, in regard to how they form up into the recommendations, and I know that that Jo is prepared to walk you through that topic by topic. So I just suggest we cross over to Jo and have her input.
Great, thanks, Ken. Jo. You're muted, Jo.
Apologies for that. I'll start again. Good morning, everybody. So you've just finished hearing from the 10 people that wish to speak as part of the submission process, which we had open for over a month from the 27th of August to the 29th of September. We had 50 submissions this time, which was up from the 11 that we received last representation review. So today, in terms of the recommendation that you have in the report in front of you, it goes through the key aspects of the initial proposal and is really looking for direction from you on all of those issues as to whether you want to make any changes. So then I can go away and prepare the final proposal, which will be adopted at the end of the month at council. So that'll be going through all those key points. So looking at the proposal to reduce the number of councillors down from 13 to 10, plus the one Māori ward councillor, combining the Pirongia and Kakapuku wards, the extension to the Maungatautari ward, the minor changes to the urban boundaries, having a look at what you want to do in terms of the community boards and the changes to their boundaries, and also looking at the names. So I'll need direction from you in terms of all of those key aspects of the proposal. So what I was proposing that I do is we kind of go through each of them in turn. I'm happy to kind of give a brief introduction to the different points and the options that actually came out of the submissions that we received, and then leave it for you to debate the issue. And if we just go through each of them in turn, and then I can note down as we go kind of any changes that we might need to make to recommendations and bring that together and pass a recommendation at the end. So this will be, so we'll adopt. So if we can do that, we'll adopt the final proposal, and just a point to note that there will be another period where we will go out and issue another public notice after we adopt the final proposal at the end of October, and there will be a period where for appeals and objections. So is everyone happy with that process?
Jo, are we going through the late submission?
The late submission, what I have done is, in terms of, for each point, I have just got the numbers.
Yep.
And so in terms of my tally, in terms of numbers, I've added that to that. So I'll be able to update the tallies as we go through each item. And in terms of that late submission, they were talking, that was from the Chamber of Commerce. So they were really kind of about providing support to the community board argument. So if you can factor that in when we get to that section, if that works for everybody.
Oh,
yeah, all good.
Okay, so the first one we'll deal with was the reducing the number of councillors. So that had majority support from the submitters. So we had 28 submissions in support. That's the updated total, 11 against and 9 neutral. You have heard quite a bit today from people in Pirongia talking about the importance of the structure, ensuring that we have adequate representation for the Pirongia community. Out of really the submissions, written submissions that have come through, you end up with a number of options that are listed in the report to consider, which are alternatives to what's in the initial proposal. You've got the option of retaining the 13 general ward councillors that you currently have. That would address the issues that some submitters have raised in terms of feeling that the drop down will be detrimental to the representation that is offered across the district. It would also protect the Pirongia community in terms of enabling that Pirongia ward to remain standalone with 2 councillor representatives. So that would achieve that. It does mean that you get quite high numbers around the council table, because there would be 13 general ward councillors plus your Māori ward councillor plus the mayor. So then you are getting up to 15 members around the council table. We did have some submitters that suggested that we should reduce the numbers down further. So one of the options that we had talked about before in the initial stages is dropping down to 7. So that option is featured in your report. And that does meet the plus or minus 10% rule. It looks at a kind of combined rural ward. We did have another option that was presented in terms of having some councillors at large. This would enable, because what will happen in terms of the those that are on the Māori roll, they will be able to vote obviously for the Māori ward councillor, but they can only vote for in terms of other council representatives if they are at large. So there is that's why we've came up with that option, which is in the report, for 7 general ward councillors plus 1 Māori ward councillor plus 2 councillors elected at large. And there is the other option to kind of add that at large to the 10 general ward councillors, which then again does put you back in the position where you end up with quite a lot of representatives around the council table. So essentially you've got the option to retain the initial proposal, look at kind of maybe status quo, or looking at kind of whether you want to drop down further and look at any permutations of having kind of at-large representation.
Joe, just to interrupt for a second there. With that at large option, it's noted that people on the Māori roll could vote for at large. Does everyone get to vote for the at large? Yeah. I just want to clarify that. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. We have identified the number of people in your report that's in there in terms of those that are on the Māori roll. And that would impact. It obviously has an impact in terms of, you could see if you've got people being voted on at large that they do come from your bigger urban centres, which then could skew representation across the district. So that's really something that you need to balance up when looking at that option.
I thought, Joe, we discussed that one, and that's the real big problem there, is it could be skewed, and those 2 at large could come from one place. It wasn't anything about, so I'm dead against that.
Yeah, okay. So look, I think we're all pretty clear. Graham, you want to comment?
Yeah, just on that at-large proposal, that's having 7 general ward councillors plus 1 Māori ward will only work by having a single rural ward. So that's not splitting them as we would with the initial proposal. And of course, you can have as many at-large councillors as you want. So the only reason Joe's talking about 2 is that then brings your total number of councillors up to the 10, which you indicated earlier on in the review.
Yes. Thanks. Okay. Thanks, Graham. Look, in some ways, I quite favour more personally. This is reducing to seven councillors. The downside of that really is it would exacerbate the issue that we have already in the rural wards. Combining it to 1 rural ward really would not be satisfactory in my view. And yeah, I guess the representation we've had from Pirongia regarding that loss or perceived loss of representation is already something to take into account. Although I do hear what Susan said, it's not really about numbers, it's about access and having the right people to listen to. So yeah, we have the recommendation, we have workshopped it. Do we have any more comments on? Oh, sorry, Roger, you want to? Yeah, Roger.
Yeah, thanks, through the chair. I've already expressed my opinion on support for reducing, but I suppose, and I'd like to ask Graham, you know, we went through this process for the last election. We're going through it for the next election. Are we going to go through it again for the next election? And how many times are we going to change our model? Graham, what influences will this, we're a high growth area, you know, growth, particularly in Cambridge, is going up and up. What would be the timing of another review, possibly, of this representation be?
Thank you. Through the chair, we are obliged under the Local Electoral Act to do this exercise again within the next 6 years, which is 2 election cycles. If we stay at the status quo, then I can guarantee that staying at the status quo would mean adding another councillor into Cambridge ward in the next 6 years. If we did this in 3 years' time, of course, it's quite resource intensive, one of these reviews, but if we were to do it in 3 years' time, we'll probably find again, with the status quo, we'd be adding another councillor into Cambridge in order to retain it. So in that sense, the status quo, the 13 of you would then, plus the Maori ward candidate, would become 14. So that might not be very sustainable. We'd be having similar problems, I think, if we drop down to the 7 general ward councillors. The 10 general ward councillors seems to be as future-proof as we can get it at this stage. And I think we'll probably find in 6 years' time that we could probably keep the same structure. Of course, we don't know what's happening with local government review as well. So that of course is almost the elephant in the room, but we can only go with what we know at this stage.
Thanks, Graham.
Yeah, thanks, Graham. Yeah, Hazel.
So Andrew, what I'd like to say to that is I keep on hearing how Cambridge is growing and might need an extra member, but I'm looking at how fast Te Awamutu and Kihikihi in particular are growing, and what numbers sort of, well, it's only projection, but Kihikihi has way surpassed any projection that they put up before. So I kind of think I stick with the 10. I don't see how 7 councillors can do unless they're going to have that job description of what they do rewritten, because where are 7 people going to get the time from? But I just wanted to draw your attention to the fact that the whole of Waipa is growing.
Yes, yeah. No, thanks.
Great.
Yeah, we do take the point, and of course, whenever any future review is done, the actual numbers will be taken into account, and you know, the result will be from there. But I think I'm hearing general, you know, okay. I guess I'm hearing that the proposal to go to 10 is generally accepted. It's not perfect, of course, but yeah. So I'm seeing a lot of nodded heads there. I don't think I need to take a vote. Is there anyone who's specifically objecting? No. Okay, let's move on. So Joe, the next point.
The next one was combining the Pirongia and the Kakupuku wards. So you had 23 submissions in support of that, which is the adjusted total, 12 against and 11 neutral. So the main real points of issues, concerns that were raised in relation to that point was in relation to the Pirongia community and ensuring that they continue to have adequate representation, which you've seen both in the submissions and you've heard from submitters today on that point.
Yep. Okay, so look, my understanding is that this step is it's virtually has to be done to make step 1 operative. We definitely heard from the submitters Pirongia today concerns about representation, and while we cannot make future mayors or councils decide what they're going to do in the future, I don't think there's been any suggestion that the Pirongia Ward Committee, as it is now, should be disbanded or would be negatively impacted in any way. Yeah, so I mean that's where I'm sitting with it. Susan.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. Just a quick comment. The only lack of or potential lack of representation by amalgamating those two wards could come from actually the Kakapuku side, on account of the fact that Kakapuku is less populated and you could potentially have a Pirongia township or village that could dominate there. But look, that's a risk we just have to take. You know, this is the way the numbers stack up. I don't sense that the interests and values of the Kakapuku ward are particularly different from Pirongia and or Haupo and all those other areas encompassing in the area. So I don't have a difficulty with it, but I certainly am mindful of the reservations raised by those Pirongia residents. But I feel comfortable with the amalgamation of the two.
Okay, Doc, thanks for that, Susan, and your point is well taken. Bruce, and then Claire.
Thank you, Andrew.
Mike.
So I've only got a little issue that maybe you could be more specific by putting less the Kaipaiki area, combined a significant part. Could that be more specific? That's just a bit of wording, maybe.
Right. Okay. It is kind of taken up in point 3. I don't know, Joe, if you have any comment on Bruce's point there.
Oh, it's a different part, Andrew, I think.
You're talking about the wording?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll make sure that, like, because this is providing us direction to
just the wording
to prepare the final proposal. And remember, we had lots of maps which delineated the areas when we adopted the initial proposal, which made reference to that. So we'll make sure that when we do our final proposal, that it needs to be really clear as to which area.
No, that's good.
Yeah, that's great. Good. So Claire and then Mike.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. So I just do have reservations about amalgamating Pirongia and Kakapuku, just from I accept what Susan's pointed out, which I think is pretty valid actually, because I'm thinking about being able to go and like if you get called to see a resident or ratepayer within the ward, and it's at the far end of the ward from where you live, it's a really long drive. It's difficult to make that connection. It's I think we've talked about the value of people being in a relationship with each other, that creates a sense of connection and community, and I just feel it's going to be really hard to make it work. And while I accept the reasons why the amalgamation is being proposed, and so the outcome of is this larger ward, but I do wonder about what difficulties it's going to create for any sitting councillor.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Claire. Mike.
Thank you, Andrew. Hey, it's just a point of clarification because it's the first time I've run through this. Just A, B, or A and B, and then C 1 through 10. We sort of all agree on the first one, but if that doesn't happen, do we motion this and second it the whole lot, or would it pay for us to do each of these because it may not be unanimous all the way through, and it just might save us going back and trying to remember, sort of thing? Is that relevant or is it not?
Yeah, it's probably a good point, actually. Joe, what's your recommendation there?
Well, I'm taking a note of kind of where you are sitting. You could certainly, as we've kind of, this one, how you feel about this one would have, impacted the one we discussed before. So, maybe in a way it might be good to just keep a running, and I'll just note down if there's any kind of consensus changes to the recommendations as you go that we need to change, and then you could vote on it in parts when we get to the end. Would that be
Yeah, okay.
Well, where you want
fine.
to land?
Yeah. No, that's fine. But thanks for that, Mike. Okay, so I think there's a general acceptance that this needs to happen to make Part C1 happen. I'm going to look at the wording a little bit. And yeah, I think your point, Claire, we just need to be aware when the new council comes in, if this goes through, that there may be some issues that help could be provided for, possibly, you know, something like that. So moving to C3, I don't think there's any real contention about that one at all. If I'm wrong, let me know. No, okay. So, and C4, yes, there was a couple of submitters who weren't delighted with that, but again, I think it's going to be a necessary part of the whole package.
Andrew, it makes sense as a local councillor. It does make sense.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, I agree with that. So moving on, point 5, again, it just makes sense, I think.
Yeah, yeah,
yeah. Point 6. Now this is the one I mean, we've had a lot of submissions regarding the community boards for and against, and some really good arguments. I think actually both ways. So yeah, I'm going to open it up for people to make their arguments. So Claire's got a hand up.
Okay, yeah, I'll launch in there first then. Yeah, it was really good actually to get some really detailed feedback from the community boards. And I'm just really conscious that council is not very clear on what community boards do. I think we have been really poorly served by the communication feedback loops. Okay, and I'm conscious of the fact that Charlotte, who was the communications manager, okay, is saying that there's really not enough, I suppose, evidence of what community boards are doing and that. But in actual fact, I was really surprised about that, because I would actually see council like comms having a particular role of getting out to the community what community boards are doing and inviting people through their networks, to be participating in community board initiatives, events, feedback, consultations, because I don't think council staff have seen community boards as the vehicle by which they should be doing their consultation through. As an example, I had a look on the Facebook page for Waipa District Council, and while they promote various initiatives within the community, not once do they say that the community board would be a way for you to make your views known, and then we don't get a feedback loop from the community board to the council. So I'm not surprised that we don't think they do anything, and that the community doesn't know what they do either. So I would hope that coming out of this, that I'd like to see that the majority rules, which is that we retain the community boards, but I'd like to see some sort of initiative set up so that we can improve the effectiveness and also the visibility, just the way it operates. I mean, when we did the Future of Local Government workshops and we had, Peter McKinley come and talking to us, he one of the things he emphasised was that for a resilient community, they really want to make decisions with people they are in relationship with, that it's the people they see in the street, that they know the decision makers and things like that. And that to me really speaks strongly to community boards. So that's my piece.
Thank you, Claire. I'm not going to make any comment at this point. I think Hazel had your hand up.
Yes, I did, because throughout all of those presentations, I listened to and I'm just going back to the time, how many times at our council meetings have I asked where is there a report from the community boards? And it wasn't there. So I really have to look to what were our councillors on those community boards doing, not to be bringing that information back to the council. That's where the breakdown in exchanging information on what is actually going on out there in the community. And I just think that's where it's not all connected. And I've had the great part of working out in Kihikihi and connecting up everybody. So now we've got an amazing work going on. Everybody knows what the other is doing. Why can't council do that? And I've really felt throughout the years that I've been on council, and certainly having worked on the community board, because that's quite a while ago. But we had our presence at the council table as well. There were not us, but the reports went back to the council table, so they knew what their community board was doing. I haven't seen that for years, and I don't know why it dropped off our agendas, and I have asked, but I've never been answered.
Okay, thank you, Hazel. Okay, who else wants to have a?
Yeah, Andrew.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't forget don't forget when we go on Diligent, all the community board agendas are there to pick up. I mean, I take time to read the TA one as well as the Cambridge one. It's just a couple of points that I want to make is a couple of people that didn't present today have their opinions about community board because they haven't got what they want to happen with the community board or community board members. And secondly, someone like that's dealing with the digital media every day will see that as their best way, but we're losing that human face-to-face contact.
Yes.
And
yeah.
I think we see the best of this, the very best of this, when we go to the rural areas. And I started that 21 years ago when I came off Dairy Group. And we found when I got into the board that the rural people weren't coming in at 6 o'clock. They were still just finishing their chores. And I like that face-to-face. You get a rapport and you know what's going on. I just raised those 2 points.
Thanks, Graham.
And Andrew, if I can just say what I was trying to say, I didn't hear the voice of the common man today either. I heard it from intellectuals who kind of like see their point of view, and that's great. That's great. And I'm not saying, but where was the voice? And that's a little bit of what Graham just said.
Thanks, Hazel. Yeah, cool. Roger.
Yeah, thanks. Through you, Mr. Chair. I mean, in the workshops that we've previously had, I've made my support of community boards quite obvious. But I think what we've heard today certainly suggests that if they are, and I hope they are, going to continue, we should maybe have a good look at them and see how we can make the boards more effective, increase the communication, and open the door between the community boards and council. And I would certainly support some energies being put into that. But as it is, I would support the community boards going ahead. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Roger. Mike.
Sorry, yeah, through the chair, Andrew, thank you. Yeah, hey, a bit like Roger, hey, I support the community boards, but we've heard some good speakers, and I guess we've seen, the community boards and how they've operated over the years that we've lived in Waipa. And one of the things I picked up from Sue is, and whether her numbers were accurate, and Graham might be to help us out here actually, or Elwyn, but 1 to 2 people turn up for the public forum. Now, in years gone past, I think many more people have turned up to the public forum. So I guess it's about being visual and what we can do there, but it really comes down to not picking up individual things, but I really do honestly believe there needs to be a review of the function of the community boards and what we actually want them to deliver. because all we're doing, to me, is stumbling from triennial election to triennial election. And if we're going anywhere, we're lucky to be treading water. You know, I think we're going backwards, if we're being honest, in terms of what the function of the community board is to the community. So it's around the relevance and the why they exist, I think, is what people want to know and what ratepayers want to know. So I don't think we should be axing them, but I do not think they should be carrying on in their current state. I really think we need an honest review. We've been right in the middle of it, and some community in this too, and spend some time between now and the next election. So post-election, they've actually got a mandate and whatever else comes with that to deliver a better service to our community.
Thanks, Mike. Seems to be a bit of a trend coming through from the submissions also. Now, I've got Marcus, Lou, and then Susan. So, Marcus. You're muted, Marcus.
I think we need to be bold and brave about change going forward. I don't think they can stay as they are, and the purpose of them, it's changed. We've got our great community advisors now. As Charlotte said about the Streets for People, Cycling for People committee we're starting. We've got all these different committees, but we need one active, engaged committee that can truly represent the community. We've got the Kiki Residents and Ratepayers group. How do we tie all these different groups in and make it work? And I think the structure as we have, it's not going to work in the future and be good representation for us. I like being able to appoint committees of really interested, engaged people for certain tasks and giving them the powers to work with our community facilitators to do actions, or something like how the Pirongia board works, or but stay as it is. I don't think that's not an option.
Thanks, Marcus. Lou.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Chair. I totally agree with what Mike just said earlier on, Mike. I think we've got to actually look very carefully at what we actually ask of our community boards and actually have something that they can need to take a grasp of the facilities of their local community and represent them more. And to that extent, I would say that we are looking at things like, let's just take the community Christmas parade, for example, and these sort of events that they facilitate that sort of thing rather than just throwing it out to groups, trying to get people involved and get the community involved. I just feel very strongly at the moment we've lost this link between the two. I think as a councillor, we're quite removed from our community. We are here to represent Waipa. And I see that as a barrier in some ways for just representing your own town. And that is a link that we have to still have people that will represent our little local community. I always believe in bottom up, strong local communities facilitating what they want in their local area. And we lose that. And unfortunately, that's happening quite a lot at the moment. And I think the big elephant in the room too is currently the big review by Mahuta at the moment on our local body. We could all be amalgamated and we might only have 2 or 3 representatives from the whole of Waipa.
Thanks, Lou. That review might go the other way. We might get smaller. Susan.
Thank you. Hey, look, gosh, what a morning, hey? Look, I've written screeds and screeds and screeds, as I'm sure you probably would have expected me to have. But I guess what I'm hearing from everybody is a bit of a shift in terms of accepting that the current structure we have isn't working, and perhaps an appetite to review it so that it does work better for our communities. I don't think anybody here would support the abolition of community boards, end of, and just have the council. I don't think that's anything anybody wants. I accept that there is a need for that second layer, for want of a better description. But it's a case of what that second layer looks like. And I think Mike's probably encapsulated it pretty well. We need to do a lot of work to find out what that layer looks like and how that will best bring out those unique voices of the communities that we have in specific communities of interest. My preference, I guess, going forward would be to actually remove the structures of the community boards and do the work leading up to the next election as to what their replacement would look like. And I hear there's some reservation around our table about, and from some submitters, about leaving it up to the kindness of the incoming mayor and elected members to actually fulfil the vision, potentially what we may have now. But I'd go out on a limb to say that I think we would ignore that, or that group of people would ignore that at their peril. I don't think that there is a single person in this district that puts their hand up for local government representation in any way, shape or form that would want to decrease the democratic engagement that our community have with our decision makers. So I don't for a minute think that any incoming council would refuse to bring in a replacement body for those community boards. So I don't, that doesn't hold any weight for me. I mean, we could sit here and talk about the numbers and the sample sizes and the increasing dissatisfaction in our resident surveys and what have you going forward. But I just think we need to honestly think about how we are going to make changes, because I think if we just say, yes, we'll renew the existence of community boards as they currently stand, and then we'll get some reports done, and then they'll probably sit in a pile and they'll never get acted. I think if we remove them now, the onus is on us to actually provide our communities with a proposed structure that will work better than what it is working now. So I guess that's really all I've got to say. So much other stuff there, but my sense is that people have actually seen the shortcomings that exist between in the current situation. And from a personal perspective, I do feel that there has been some criticism lodged towards councillors that sit on those community boards and the roles they play. I think it's a little unkind to lay all that blame at the feet of those councillors, because I think we've done a lot of really good work for those community boards over the years that we've all been on them. And in terms of the failure to report back to council, I recall that matter was actually put to council some time ago, and we all voted to no longer hear from them. So it was actually this membership that decided we didn't need to hear from them. And the other thing was that I don't believe this is a comms issue. This is actually a structural issue. And is our current structure fit for purpose for 2021 going forward, as opposed to a historical creation of 1989, which is obviously some time ago. I was leaving high school at that year, so that gives you some idea of how old the current structure is. So anyway, I'll just leave my comments there. So I would be, should we put these up separately, which I think we probably should, I will be voting against the proposal insofar as it relates to the community board retention issue, in the hopes that we might be able to make something better and put the asset on ourselves as an organisation to provide that to our communities.
Thank you, Susan. Yeah, that's, I mean, you're very clear in your position, and yeah, I'll come to you in a moment, Mike. I think I'd also like to say we've had a lot of good submissions on this subject, both for and against, and it has certainly made us all think about community boards and the fact that they could either, if we retain community boards or not, either way, we are looking for better function and better a better communication. Yeah, I guess Charlotte kind of viewed the community board as a communication vehicle, but I kind of feel they should be more than that as well. So just leaving that there for the moment. I'll come back to you, Mike, and yeah, away you go.
Thanks for that, through the chair. Just with regard to what Susan just said, I think, I'm going to vote that we retain them, but I think what we do both agree on, and I think probably what the majority of the people on this Zoom council, this finance meeting, agree on, is that regardless of the outcome here, change needs to happen. And I think probably across us all, we agree on that change for the better needs to happen, whatever we vote on here. And just a point of clarification, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's not this current group that made the decision not to formally receive community board minutes, etc., etc. It was a previous council that was in place before I began.
Oh, possibly so. We won't get into that. Yeah. So
just quickly, yeah, I think you might be right, Mike, but it's still council that made that decision. And the other thing is, it's not just a comms issue; it's actually engagement, which is a much bigger issue in terms of where we're at right now. I mean, comms is comms, and engagement's another. So, and that's where we're challenged.
Yeah. Okay. Bruce.
Thanks, Andrew. Just a quick question: the need to have two councillors on a community board, is that because if one can't attend, you've always got one there most times, or if not two? Because there was a threat that the community board are governed a little bit by councillors present. So just clarification.
I think it was actually more that one councillor came from the town ward, if you like, and one came from the rural ward. Okay, so you had a representation from.
Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. And that's it, Andrew. You did right. The other thing is, when Elwyn and I go to the board, we do not dominate. And you will know that we've never had a councillor as the chairman of the community board. The community board people elect their own person to chair it. And that's the way that it should be. It's their baby.
Yeah. Yeah. All good. Okay. So look, Jim.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. Hey, listen, community boards, they've always been a vexed issue. And I suppose looking not only with ours, but across the country, and the criticism that's made is that some councils give them more responsibility than others. From a statutory point of view, they have fairly fixed terms of reference, and they can really do what they determine in terms of holding council to account. But it's those community type activities that they organise that are so, I suppose, valued by the community, and that can be done by other than a statutory community board. So I'm just one question I had for Graham, probably, in terms of making the decision today. If we decide to do away with the community boards, is there any way of giving some, I suppose, confidence that there will be something to replace it? Or are we basically going to say we'll work on that after the next election? Because I think if we just make that resolution today, then there's probably no way back from it.
Through the chair, this is probably more a question for Ken and Joe, but as I understand it, if it was to be in the final proposal, then obviously that is open for objections and appeals that would then be heard and determined by the local government commission. If we wanted to work on any alternative, then presumably Ken and Joe will come in here and override me that it would be a piece of work that would need to be done presumably before the next election.
Yeah, so through the chair, look, in response to his worship's comments, or in fact his worship's question, yeah, look, I would suggest to the committee that if you were to do that, like if you were to resolve to discontinue the community boards today, you would actually add in an additional resolution directing staff to develop an alternative proposition that could be considered by council, and yes, I would certainly recommend that happens prior to the election, so that the incoming council is well informed as to what a suitable alternative would be.
Because we do that recommendation around kind of September time from the old council into the new council, and you would want any kind of solution to be worked up and probably part of that recommendation to the incoming council. So that's how we would capture it in that process. So it would need to be well underway in kind of a final solution, or kind of in a state that it's in a suitable proposal to make the recommendation to the new council by around September.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Ken, you just got a further comment?
Yes.
I'll come to you in a minute, Claire.
Yeah, so through the chair and in order, I guess, to give some balanced advice here. So I have just directly answered His Worship's question about about what happens if you choose to to disestablish the community boards. If you do determine today that the community boards would continue, I would actually equally suggest that in relation to the discussion that's been around the table today, that again you would add on another part to today's resolution, and I guess that would be directing staff to review and report back in regard to the appropriate purpose of community boards going forward, and I guess to strengthen the role of those boards going forward. Now of course that would be a significant piece of work for council staff to do, but I think that keeps faith with the discussion today. So I think no matter what the outcome today in terms of whether community boards stay or whether they go, I would suggest some significant work on staff between now and the next election, or September, or whatever date you just said, Joe. In regard to shoring up a better local form of community representation going forward.
Yeah, thanks, Ken. I agree with that. Claire, and then Liz.
Yeah, so I'm not that comfortable with the proposal to do away with community boards without another alternative that we're agreeable to in place already. So, and I'm also very mindful that a lot of the feedback we got through the submission process, while it wasn't specifically saying yay or nay for community boards, but there's quite a strong message that elected representatives were much more favoured than appointees made by council through whatever process. And so I'm a bit surprised that we seem to have moved from acknowledging that the performance of community boards could be improved and that we'd be really supportive of a process to work on how that might look, to saying, well, then we should just do away with them completely and look at a completely fresh thing. So yeah, I'm supportive of doing a review and actually working with people that are on community boards, finding out how we could help them to structure things so that they can do more of what they think they should be doing as well. I'm not convinced by an argument that it's 30 years old, so it has to change. I mean, councils are also 30 years old. There's a lot of other institutions that are a lot older than 30 years, but they still function well. So I'm more of in the camp that it's perhaps that it's not been given attention to, that there did need to be a way to structure things in a soft sense, so not the numbers and the board itself, but just giving them better support and understanding what mission they're on, and to make sure that they can deliver it.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Claire. Look, we actually haven't moved anywhere yet. We've got the C6, which will be voted on, because clearly there's differences of opinion here. So yeah, we haven't moved anywhere. We've just had people express some potentials and opinions. Liz.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. Look, I guess my comments earlier, I would like to retain the community boards, but for me, I'd also like to see the community boards continue to be elected. That way they have a real mandate from their community. And just echoing, I guess, what Claire was saying. I like the wording that you had, Ken. So in addition to the current resolution that stands, that we resolve to review the function of the community boards, looking at their visibility and how they engage with our community. So I would like that to be added to the existing resolution. Thanks, Andrew.
Cool. So look, this has been well debated. Oh, Lou. You're muted, man.
I just support what Liz just said. I'm very keen on that.
Okay, thank you. So, Joe, you can add something to that, because I think whether it's yes or no to item C6, we're going to want a phrase or a sentence requesting that the function is reviewed and improved.
Yes, no, we can add something to that. So we could, something along the lines of direct staff to review and report back on options for strengthening the role of community boards, which could then include their purpose, if you're all right for something like that to be added at the end.
Yep, no, that's good. So when that comes back to council for final approval, that will have that in it, and we can.
You could pass that appropriate to pass that recommendation today, and then that can just and so that can happen from here. So it won't need to be part of the final proposal. It will just be then on the authority today. It'll be a package of work that's undertaken.
Okay, great. All right. So item C6, which at the moment reads retain 2 community boards representing 4 communities, these being the Cambridge Community Board covering the Cambridge subdivision and the Maungatautari subdivision, and the Te Awamutu and Kihikihi Community Board covering the Te Awamutu and Kihikihi subdivision, the Kakapuku subdivision, and retaining the appointment of 2 councillors to each community board. So that's the resolution that I'm going to put to a vote. So I'm going to ask all in favour, please raise your hands.
Are you going to do that now, or are we going to do them at the end?
I want to do this one separately, just because.
Yep.
Because it's fresh.
Are we okay with that?
Okay. Yep. No, we can. Were you going to have a discussion on that, or is everyone agreed on the area that they covered? I know that was something, Councillor Webber, you raised earlier, and as part of the verbal submissions as to whether they are how we have them in the initial proposal, or whether they should also cover the Pirongia area, or was no one had any further? I just noted down that was something Councillor Webber raised.
Look, just on that, I like with Pirongia and Kakapuku being amalgamated, then that whole area comes into Te Awamutu Community Board by default. It just does.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean to say that the Pirongia ward committee needs to change, in my view. We all happy with that?
I agree, Andrew. I agree. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I think that covers that off quite adequately. So I'm going to.
Sorry, just before you do, are we going to add on that bit into clause 6? That bit that Joe's just done up in terms of the review?
Yes.
I think that would probably more be a separate recommendation at the end as an E, because I suppose you've got to remember in 6, it's connected to the first part of C, which talks about the initial proposal, which this is kind of come out of the initial proposal, but it's not part of it, and so will be a separate piece of work. So if you're all right with that one, voting on that at the end. If we're doing it in parts, we'll just need movers and seconders and then a vote.
Yeah, okay. So look, I guess maybe we don't need to specifically vote on C6 if that's bit, but I do want, because this is going to be the sticking point at the end. So I do want to know at this point who is in favour of C6 as it stands and who isn't.
Right.
So could I have a raise your hands? I think we're well debated. Does anyone else have anything they really want to say, Claire? Or you just?
Oh no, I was just indicating supporting it.
Okay, cool. So look, if you're in favour of C6 as it stands, please raise your hand. Yeah, okay, so that's passed.
Could I have my position noted, please?
Yes, you may, absolutely.
Yeah, mine too, please.
So Marcus and Susan, opposition will be noted. Thank you.
But just to clarify, that wasn't a vote, that was just a check-in, wasn't it?
Yeah, but I mean, I think we're probably going to have those oppositions at the end anyway.
Okay,
so
that's all right. Just checking, so we make sure we have a mover and a seconder when we vote. Yep.
Thank you. So moving on, item C7, I don't see any issues with that.
No, that's sensible, Andrew.
Yeah. Likewise with 8.
Yeah.
And in terms of 9, the names, I mean, I think that's been fairly well canvassed. Iwi consulted. We're all pretty happy. Likewise with 10. Yeah. Item D. Right. So that's it. And you're going to add in an E, I guess, Joe?
An E, so we could have Ken's just drafted, direct staff to review and report back on the most appropriate purpose of the community boards and to strengthen the role of community boards.
Right.
Are people happy with that?
Sounds good. Yep.
Yep.
Ken, did you want to make? Oh, sorry, Susan.
No, sorry, go Ken.
Ken.
Oh no! Look, Joe's just Joe's just provided the wording that we've just been doing on the fly. Remotely. Yeah.
Okay, Susan.
Sorry, could you just read that again, please, Joe?
Oh, you're on mute, Joe.
I can't hear you, Joe.
Actually, while she is coming off mute, I can do that. So, so the new clause was clause E. So to direct staff to review and report back on the most appropriate purpose of the community boards and to strengthen the role of community boards.
Are we wanting to strengthen the role? I thought it was more about looking at trying to understand their purpose. I mean, I'm trying to understand.
Yeah, that's a good point.
What we're doing. I mean, strengthening a role is a significant jump from what we discussed.
Yeah, if we just leave it at review, I mean, it may well result in a strengthened resolve, a strengthened, whatever you said, but it may not as well.
Was one is assuming there that the staff are going to do it without actually perhaps talking to the community as to how they see it, and that's where this is a big task for our staff to actually get this right, and I just think that they've got to be backed up in this. They've got to know that because you know what I'm trying to say.
Yep. Claire and then Mike.
Yeah, so I agree that the wording of the first part definitely needs to be tweaked so that it's not that staff are determining what the most appropriate purpose is, but that through consultation or working with the community, we have a better idea of what the purpose should be and how they should engage and to improve outcomes.
Yeah, I'm sure they will consult. Mike.
Yeah, pretty much just on what Claire said. I thought of the word for staff to facilitate, definitely not to run this thing sort of in-house. The staff's job would be to facilitate, and therefore you bring in the appropriate people.
Okay. So Ken's got another.
Yeah. Look, I was simply going to say that was our inherent intent to there's no way that staff would put up a proposition that hadn't been consulted on with the relevant people. But yes, if you want that strengthening to very clearly indicate that we could do that. I guess the other thing, just in relation to Susan's comment, I mean, it sounds like the word strengthen was a concern there. So perhaps it may be more that we review and report back on the most appropriate purpose and role of the community boards. Would that be better to take that word strengthen out?
Yeah, that seems slightly better. I guess I'm just conscious of the dangers of a sort of setting scope on the fly for what I see as quite a significant body of work for our staff to do, and it's kind of. Yeah, I'm just conscious that if we get the wording wrong, it kind of almost predetermines the outcome of what that investigation will be. So if you use a word like strengthen the role, obviously that's where it will go. So just mindful of the dangers of setting scope in this sort of context for an investigation, that's all.
No,
although 100% accept the need for it, but I'm just wary that, that the words we put into this are actually going to be quite far-reaching.
Yeah,
we could always signal the intent to undertake a review with us bringing back the staff, bringing back the scope of the review with the parameters and talking to you about that. So we're all kind of agreed with how it's going to work up front, because yeah, as you agree, it's quite difficult to do on the fly, and I think maybe with putting some ideas down and some reflection time, you might be able to kind of get a better idea of the parameters of the review that you want undertaken and how you see it operating.
I think that's a much better idea, Joe. I don't want us to just sort of knee-jerk say something, chuck it down on paper and move on, and then not get the comprehensive investigation or review that we're really after.
Yeah, no, all good.
So it would be direct staff to undertake a review of the functioning of the community boards, with the scope of that review to be reported back and agreed with councillors prior to commencement.
I think you mentioned scope and parameters.
Yeah. So I'll review and report back. So direct staff to undertake a review and agree the scope and parameters of that review before it commences.
Andrew, could I just say something there? I'm sure that we should have in there, like the aim is to improve performance. So not necessarily strengthen, but the whole discussion we had during deliberations was that we agreed that we wanted to see a better outcome for the role and function of the community board. So I'd like to have that covered in the resolution some way.
Yeah, I don't see any problem with that. I mean, not many reviews undertaken with the idea of doing anything but improving. But for all that, that's all good. Yeah.
Andrew, I don't want to see us going back to the committee again. We've gone to the committee, and the reason we're reviewing all this is because the community have come back and thrown some ideas at us. And I just agree with what Claire says. It's all about how can we enhance what the boards do.
Yeah. So the process is going to come back to us before it's commenced. So we will get the opportunity to make sure that, we don't. Yeah. I think that's well covered. So,
can I just say, is there any chance of you sharing your screen with the wording on it, or is there no wording available?
I will just, I'll type something up. So if you give me a few minutes, was there anything else that you needed to talk about at the moment while I'm preparing that?
Yeah,
we've spent the whole morning so far. With a few minutes isn't going to make any difference.
Okay.
Andrew, just through you as a chair, just a point of clarification. If we make this amendment, this will go back to the public again, and then it can then they can put submissions into this again. Is that correct?
Potentially, not necessarily.
No, not this aspect. I suppose what we're talking about here in terms of the review of the performance and function of the community board is something that's an important issue, but it's kind of a side issue that's come out as a consequence of the review. So in terms of the public, we will go out, whatever you decide today. If it's keep community boards and that goes into the final proposal, then that will go back out to the public as part of that whole process, and then be a process for appeals or objections, so they can engage on that. So whereas this is a piece of work which has come out of some of the feedback that you've received today, so won't be part of the actual structure of the representation review.
Thanks, Joe.
Can you see my screen now?
Yep.
Yes.
I'm happy with that.
Anyone got any changes
No.
they want made there?
That's fine, Joe.
Yeah.
Okay.
Joe, does the word consider need to be there? Considering it?
No, we can go to undertake a review to
improve
the role and functions of community boards prior to commencing that review scope. Yep. So we'll come back to the Finance and Corporate Committee, the scope of that review.
That sounds great.
Yep.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
Okay. Rightio, you can take that off screen now.
Right, trying to, oh, here we go. Just trying to find the right button. Sorry.
Excellent. Okay. So I think we're at the point now where we can vote on the recommendation A, B, and C, A, B, C, D, and E, in fact, with a lot of those. So it's been well debated, discussed. I'm going to put the motion as a whole. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Contrary, no.
Sorry.
I know you're going. So yeah,
you're putting the whole thing. You're not going to put them off, break them up to pieces.
No. I guess I can. Joe, can we do that? Because I know Susan.
Just by paragraph.
Really only want to. Ken, yep, advise me.
Chair, I would suggest that you at least break out the what number is it? C6 was it, or C6? Because it is clear that a couple of the members want to vote against that, and it would be unfortunate if they had to vote against the entire resolution.
Okay, let's do it like that.
And just to interrupt again, and 10 is naming the subdivisions, presuming that that there should be an existence of a community board. So they're kind of related to my mind. Would seem ridiculous for me to vote in support of the naming of subdivisions for committees that I don't agree with.
Rightio. Yeah.
Yep, we have done things like this before where we've done them in past. We just get a mover and seconder for each element, and then you get a vote on each part. So it's just a matter of, you could always vote on A and B to get a mover and seconder for that together, and vote on that, and then do the other parts mover and seconder for each bit, and take a vote. That procedurally would work.
Okay.
Yeah, except Joe, I'm not sure we'd be wanting a mover and a seconder for all the subparts of Part C, would we? Wouldn't it be that to a mover and a seconder for everything apart from 6 and 10 of Part C? You could that could be voted on, and then just come back separately to those two.
Yep, I suppose at the start, Andrew makes it clear that initially you're voting on C with the exclusion of 6 and 10, and then you get a mover for 6 and 10 and table them and vote on those. Yep.
Right. Let's do it like that. That sounds a lot easier. So here we go. We're voting on the recommendations A, B, C, D, and E, excluding C6 and C10. So all in favour. Beg your pardon?
I'm happy to move.
Happy to move. I need a move. I was going to not even do that. So thanks, Susan. And a seconder, please, Lou. Great. So now all in favour, please say aye.
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 Contrary, no. That's carried. And now we will separately move C6 and C10. Could I have a mover, please? Hazel and Bruce. All in favour?
Aye.
Contrary, no.
No. Myself.
So we are
Noted.
going to have a notice of contrary objection by Susan and Marcus. Yeah, and Marcus. Okay. So that is duly done. The motion, however, is passed. And that brings us to tab 7, resolution to exclude the public. Could I have a mover, please?
Can we go offline?
Thanks, Liz, and I lost my grip there. Thanks, Philip. Great. All in favour?
Aye.